Hey everyone, it's Julie, and thank you for joining me for this much belated walkthrough of the Raven's Prophecy Tarot. This was a request, and I am so sorry that I am filming this so late, but hopefully better late than never. I bought this deck at the end of September as I was getting into the Raven Cycle series by Maggie Stiefvater, and she is also the creator of this deck, which is inspired by that series. So this deck was published some years back. It's not a new deck, so I'm sure a number of you are already familiar with the deck, have seen images from this deck. It comes in this standard Llewellyn box, although mine came damaged, came ripped like this, which I was okay with because I don't store my decks in these boxes. As long as the guidebook is good and the deck is good, I don't really worry about the box. Let's take a quick look at the guidebook. The pages are not in color, as we've been seeing in the more recent Llewellyn guidebooks, and that's fine by me. That didn't bother me at all. And the guidebook starts off talking about how much Maggie Stiefvater loves stories and how she feels that this pertains to tarot. And then we get into the genesis of the deck and how it was inspired by the Raven Cycle series, how to do a reading, the tarot basics pretty much. You have some spreads, and then we get into the major and minor arcana. And it's formatted with the black and white thumbnail of the image. You have some keywords, and then you have the card description. I read this guidebook from front to back because this deck is, which we'll take a look at in a minute, it's a departure from the depictions that are common in RWS decks. I would say that this is based, in terms of descriptions, it's overall, it leans towards RWS, but the images definitely do not. And so I wanted to read the guidebook thoroughly, and as you read, you can just tell that Maggie Stiefvater is a writer. She just has a way with words. I mean, she is able to convey so much with such brevity. I mean, there's just not a lot of writing, and yet it's so accessible. She doesn't try too hard. She's not trying to be too flowery, too highbrow. They're just, accessible descriptions. More importantly for me, they were memorable descriptions. And she writes the guidebook in such a way that it's not dependent on her book series. So in case you're wondering whether you needed to have read the Raven Cycle series, you do not need to read the series to be able to use this book. In fact, I started using this deck before I was even close to finishing the series, but that did not hinder me at all. I will say that even though you don't need to read the series to use the deck, my having read the Raven Cycle just made using the deck all that much more fun and enjoyable and entertaining, and just a wonderful experience. So as I was making my way through the book series, I would be able to make connections between certain details of the books and some of the cards. And so that was fun. I really enjoyed doing that. And, whether these connections are in line with Maggie Stiefvater's intent, I have no way of knowing, but they were connections that were immediate to me. Let's now take a look at the deck. I can't remember if I told you that I modified the deck, but as you can see, I modified it. I'll try to put in an original picture of what the backs used to look like. The fronts pretty much looked like this. The orange borders going all the way around and the titles on the bottom. Now, I don't mind the color. I wasn't bothered by the color and the fact that, you know, a lot of people say it looked very Halloween. That's not what bothered me. It just felt, the color just felt a little too overpowering. And so I considered just cutting off, I just considered cutting off these borders and leaving the title, but that would have meant a very inconsistent front, which would have driven me bonkers. So what I ended up doing was I used the front to trim off the title. And then I flipped the card over and used the outer orange lines as my gauge for trimming off the borders. Now, that means that for some of the cards, you do lose a little bit of image, but not substantially. It's nothing that I notice. And so I feel like the backs are as clean as they're gonna get. I am missing a little bit of the pentagram, which does kind of drive me batshit, but you know, it is what it is. If it continues to bother me, there's always contact paper, but there's also always laziness. So we'll see. Now, you guys know that I am not picky about cardstock and that I actually like Llewellyn cardstock, but this cardstock is different than what I'm used to. This is glossier, I guess, slipperier. And so you can, because it's black, you can see fingerprints all over. And just for comparison, like this is the kind of cardstock I'm used to. It's not completely matte. It's not completely gloss, kind of in between. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just, you can see the difference. It's just in terms of the sheen. This is way shinier and slipperier than this. This is the Steampunk Tarot, and my Everyday Witch also has this similar cardstock. So I wish it weren't so glossy, but it's fine, whatever. As you can see, since I lost the titles on the cards, I had to write them in. So I wrote the numbers and the elemental symbols using this Uniposca paint marker in gold and sometimes white if I needed to. Now it is time for the flip through. Again, these images are not traditional, but that's where the guidebook comes in. I think Maggie Stiefvater does an excellent job of explaining the intent behind the images, especially ones that aren't so self-explanatory. And I love this deck, you know, not just because the art is gorgeous, not just because I love the Raven Cycle series, but because it is so non-traditional and it's not like really anything that I have in my collection. And so that's one of the things that I really value about this deck and why I enjoy using it so much. The Fool. Now, when I saw this image, I immediately thought of a character in the series named Blue. And again, whether Maggie Stiefvater had this intent in mind, no idea, but that's what I thought of. And I'm going to apologize from the get-go because I will probably making book references and I don't mean to like be irritating about it, but I can't help it. And it's my video, so I can do what I want. The Magician. This is a hand that we will see in other images throughout the deck, which is another thing that is great about this deck, that you see reoccurring symbols, and it just makes the whole deck and the whole, you know, journey, the whole story feel very cohesive and continuous. We have the High Priestess, the Empress, and Sarah from Sunset Bow, when she did her walkthrough, she mentioned that this reminded her of the forest that is in the book. And I totally get that. It reminds me of that as well. We have the Emperor. Again, another symbol, the crown. This is going to be the same crown that you'll be seeing throughout the deck. And understandably an important symbol, given that in the book, it talks about Welsh kings, and the final book in the series is called The Raven King. So the Hierophant. In the guidebook, the description explains how the knowledge and wisdom and tradition, it's kept within this lantern that is passed on from person to person. So I really like that idea. The Lovers. I love that this card does not, it depicts, I think these are elk. It depicts elk instead of people. Oftentimes we see people, and the automatic association or vibe is that romantic facet of this card. But I feel like the fact that this card doesn't use people, it just makes it more flexible to interpretation. The Chariot. Strength. We have the Hand again. The Hermit. And the Wheel, with all the seasons depicted. Justice. So you can see how shiny this cardstock is. The Hanged Man. Oh, sorry for the glare. The Hanged Man. Raven, of course. Death. Here's that crown again. Temperance. The Devil. And there was a scene in the book, one of the books, where I automatically wondered, oh, I wonder if this is the Devil card. I wonder if this is the inspiration for the Devil card. I think it is. I don't know. The Tower. The Star. The Moon. The Sun. We have Judgment. And this reminds me, again, we see the crown. We have this journal, which a character in the book does have a journal that's very dear to him. And this really, when we're again reading some scenes like this really resonated with me, seeing this image and then connecting that to certain scene. And finally, the World, to round out the major arcana. And I really do love this depiction of the world. We have gone down a road, we've made it through, and where does the journey lead to next? And the book takes place in this town called Henrietta in Virginia, which is supposed to be, close to actually where I live, some hours from where I live here in Virginia, which is kind of cool because she makes reference to DC and Arlington. And anyway, I digress. But anyway, this does remind me of the setting in which the series takes place. And so I can definitely imagine the characters driving along a road like this because they're in the car a lot. All right. I'm going to try to go faster and not be so annoying about talking about the books. Okay, here we go. Because really this is, again, a great deck that you do not need the series. I'm telling you, you do not need the series to use this deck. All right, let's look at the wands. Ace of Wands. 2. 3. 4, 5, 6. Sorry about the glare. I hope it's not too bad. 7. I think this is a favorite of many people who own this deck, this depiction of the hand protecting the flames. It's gorgeous. 8, 9 of Wands, and 10 of Wands. You have the Page. Maybe over here. Knight, Queen, and King. Cups, we have ravens for cups. 2 of Cups. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Page, Knight, Queen, and the King. Next we have the swords, Ace of Swords, 2. Here we see the Magician's hands again, 3. This is a very interesting take on the 3 of Swords. I don't mind it. I like when I see different versions of the 3 of Swords because the original version can get pretty boring. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Page, Knight, Queen, and King. God, it's so glossy. Ugh. And now for the final suit, the suit of coins. This deck uses roses. Ace of Coins, 2. I apologize for this glare. I know it's annoying. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Page of Coins, Knight, the Queen, and the King. There you have it. This was the Raven's Prophecy Tarot by Maggie Stiefvater. I hope that you enjoyed this walkthrough and it wasn't too painful with all my rambling and being all over the place. But let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the deck. Let me know if you've read the series. I would love to hear your thoughts. So as usual, drop a comment below and I will see you in the next video. Take care.